This and all talks at the 2019 JavaScript for WordPress Conference are brought to you in part by our sponsors Pantheon, a high-performance hosting platform with agile developer tools. Check them out at pantheon.io.
Hey everybody, we are back after our office yoga break for track 1, JavaScript, here at the JavaScript for WordPress Conference. My name is Chrissy Chirinos. I am your MC for today for track 1. I am the product manager for Managed WooCommerce over at Liquid Web, which is an integrated solution for managed WooCommerce stores at scale. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the JavaScript for WordPress Slack or anywhere else. I'm available. And for our 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time session, we have Mark Urain. Now, Mark, will you drop your bio for us in the chat?
You bet.
So that we can have it for posterity. Thank you. Mark, you're in for a treat. Mark is a creative technologist at Automatic, contributing to the open source project that is WordPress. He is focusing on Gutenberg Phase 2, and so incredibly important work that's going to affect all of us that are working with WordPress and with JavaScript and with Gutenberg. And without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Mark, and let's hear about disruptive innovation.
All right, thank you so much. I hope everybody got some yoga in during the break. Thank you, Zach, for that. I'm so centered now and focused, and hopefully that's going to open up everybody's mind to some disruptive innovation and what this means. So this talk is not going to have code. It's not going to have any JavaScript in it, but we're going to talk about a little bit about that stuff. So I'm, as mentioned, I'm Mark, and I'm basically a creative technologist. That means I'm a designer who likes to do things in code. I like to write code. And while my focus is phase 2 of Gutenberg, that's where I spend all my time. And while that happens, that means I pay attention to a lot of things that look like this. So when WordPress 5.2 Jocko came out, one of the first replies was, does it remove Gutenberg? And if not, when is that scheduled? And other tweets like this, you know, the editor is not good. You're still trying to push that editor down our throats. Or does this release remove the Gutenberg disaster? So these are the things that I pay attention to as I'm contributing to the project, and I'm trying to understand why people feel this way or how we can improve this product so that it's more adopted and accepted in the community. And while the adoption and the acceptance is growing rapidly with it as we're making improvements, we need to think of why this is. And I believe why is because of disruptive innovation, something called disruptive innovation. That term was coined by Clayton Christensen, I believe. And he mentions that every company, business, service, product, requires some self-disruption. If the business is not disrupting itself, then something else is going to come along and disrupt it from the outside. So in some of his writings, he mentions that the characteristics of disruptive businesses, and if you go through, he says, the product may not appear as attractive as existing solutions. So it's something I want to highlight in this talk and keep in the back of everyone's mind. There's another point I want to make, is that innovation that is disruptive allows a whole new population of consumers at the bottom of a market access to the product. And these new consumers or new users may not have a lot of skill or a lot of money to initially be a part of this. So thinking about these two things, I want to continue with disruptive innovation. In 2015, Matt Mullenweg wrote about Calypso, the project. And in that, he writes that one of the hardest things to do in technology is disrupt yourself. So thinking about that, he was thinking about that already in 2015. How can we disrupt WordPress in such a way to move it forward, to bring it and keep pushing it into the future? We don't want to stay stagnant. We want to keep growing. And we're fortunate, our community is fortunate, that we have a lot of leadership right now that's willing to try and challenge ourselves and push the software in directions and make hard decisions, which is a great thing for our community. So this dichotomy involves a disruptor and a disruptee. These are a few examples I just want to go over about how personal computers have disrupted the mainframe. Cellular phones have disrupted fixed line telephony. I mean, last week, my folks actually just finally got rid of their home phone, and they're completely reliant on mobile phones now. They're in their mid to late 60s. So that's a thing that's becoming more and more popular. There's a lot of mobile first nations out there that primarily only use cell phones. Free online courses have disrupted four-year colleges. We can look at JavaScript for WordPress as an example of this, that I don't need to go to a four-year college to learn JavaScript or learn about WordPress. I can come online and I can try out a course and learn more about the software and improve my skill sets and become more valuable. So I wanted to jump into also some companies that have actually disrupted industries. Airbnb, we know, has disrupted hotels, that industry. Uber and Lyft have disrupted like the rideshare, the taxi industry. And what's interesting, I want to note here, what's interesting is that when disruption comes, a lot of the influencers of the original paradigm oftentimes increase regulation to diminish the disruption that's happened. And this is a common trend that's happened throughout history, is that, for example, with Uber and Lyft, I live in Southern California, and there was regulation posed to prevent them from entering the airports. So you couldn't get an Uber or Lyft ride at the airport. That has since changed because demand has proven positive in that aspect. But these are things we should be as a community aware of, that when disruption happens, governance seems to start taking shape and starts trying to regulate more. So we should be aware of that. Amazon disrupted kind of the brick and mortar retail. Nest disrupted traditional thermostats. Netflix, we know the case of Blockbuster, video rental stores in the States were disrupted and went out of business. And the Apple iPod, has disrupted portable CD players. So Uber, as I was talking about before, earlier this year, back in February, I believe, they published an article and they were talking about ways in which they can cannibalize their own business. So years ago, they disrupted their black car service by introducing these lower margin UberX rides. And now, today, they're buying and getting into the industry of motorized scooters and bicycles with the intention of cannibalizing or disrupting their rideshare service. So they're proactively thinking about ways that they can innovate and evolve into the future. So the fear of making the wrong choices leads some companies to strategic paralysis. I think this is something as well that we need to think about as a community. Right now, we're experiencing a lot of change with WordPress. And as I mentioned before, there's been some really hard decisions made to push it in this direction. And I believe that that's a good thing that's happening right now. We don't want to be paralyzed. We don't want WordPress to become stagnant. And as a community, we can either push back and not accept change, in which case I would quote the famous quote that if you dislike change, you'll like irrelevance even less. So if we don't disrupt ourselves, someone else is, and they're going to come in and they're going to take and become the popular thing. Right now, we love WordPress because it does so many things for us. So let's try to increase it, improve it, and innovate upon it. This is a graph detailing from builtwith.com. It details the sites built on WordPress right now. And this red line, this trend going up, the top 1 million sites, is increasing rapidly. We see this, right? WordPress is now, I think today, 34.1% of all websites are built on WordPress. That's over a third, and that's a huge, huge market share. This is a perfect time. Many of us might think this is a perfect time to coast. This is a perfect time to cruise through and just relax and say, you know what, we got this. A third of the internet is on WordPress. It's not going anywhere. Let's just maintain it and roll with it. But if we look at the top 100,000 sites here, that's starting to teeter. The trend is going down. The top 10,000 sites is pretty stagnant on that level. So I would submit that now is a time for disruptive innovation. Right when we're feeling so comfortable, right when we feel like WordPress is so great and everywhere and permeating the internet, now's the time when we could disrupt ourselves. And that leads me to Gutenberg. My focus is Gutenberg. So I want to talk about how this is disrupting WordPress. I didn't mention it earlier, but I can mention that WordPress itself was a disruptor. WordPress gave the freedom for anyone to publish anything online. It's under the GPL license, it's free. So people have an advantage now with WordPress, and that disrupted a whole industry of gatekeepers. And now we're working to disrupt WordPress itself in a good way. So to do this, there's basically 4 principles of self-disruption. And we'll go over these in detail or a little bit, and I'll bring out some examples. But hopefully we get through this and we can learn something about self-disruption and be able to support the disruption that's going on. So the steps basically are to target, or the principles are to target a need that can be met more effectively. Number 2, to identify your disruptive strengths. We need to find those strengths within ourselves, within the community that can push this. Number 3, we all need to kind of step back. We're locked into our flows. We're locked into how WordPress works right now. But we should take a step back or sideways and kind of view the field again. Really take a good look at where everything's going right now. And then finally, we want to let our strategy emerge. It's going to come from within us and from within all of us. So targeting a need. If you can, think to yourself right now about a need in WordPress that needs to be met. And then think of, is there a need in the internet? Is there a need in the ethereal world of the internet that needs to be met for people? I would submit that a need for a more versatile content management system is one that needed to be met. And to justify this, we saw multiple CMSs rising throughout the years, gaining in popularity, people flocking to them to publish content, to use their systems, whatever system that might have been that they felt comfortable with. Page builders plugins were growing rapidly in the system, in the WordPress ecosystem. So we were seeing a big pull for not only people who wanted to just write content, but people who wanted to build their pages. They wanted to get involved with the layout of their pages. And ultimately we've seen a rise in closed platforms, Facebook and Twitter and these other ways that you can publish content. But it was, and provided a great viewing audience, but still they were closed. That content was no longer the person's, but the company's. So another Another need I would say would be to unify the various interfaces within WordPress itself, and that's a more focused WordPress need. But we had, or we currently have, we had the editor, the customizer, WP admin as a whole, and even widgets and plugins were providing their own interfaces oftentimes, and this caused a disconnect with users to really try to understand where to go, how to use an interface. Things were looking different throughout WP admin. We've seen this. There wasn't a consistent way to interact with things. So identifying our disruptive strengths, I asked, think about ways in which people within our community are strong, have strengths, and how that might influence any disruption that might happen with WordPress. JavaScript, for one, was fully adopted, and libraries were being built on top of it. This trend took off. It's been growing. It hasn't stopped. And it was a great opportunity to start learning JavaScript deeply. We had many developers that were picking up JavaScript, that were learning it, that wanted to come in. And these are excellent advantage points for us. And a great amount of learning came from the Calypso project. If you followed that project on GitHub or online, you'll see that there was a lot of work done with these more modern libraries. A lot of conversations happened and a lot of learning happened. So number 3 is stepping back or sideways in order to grow. And Calypso, it was a fresh look, right, at the WP admin. It used an API and modern libraries. So it was essentially like a sidestep or a sideways look at this whole thing we call the WP admin. And from that, we were able to discern and make judgments and decisions that really helped feed into and inform some of the work we do in Gutenberg, some of the work we do in the community, and how to communicate this. Calypso and Gutenberg as well now. Gutenberg uses Git and GitHub instead of SVN and Track. This is an interesting deterrent or an interesting sidestep to this, right? People have an aversion to Track. It's not as pretty. Might be a little bit rougher to get involved. And it seems like things that get submitted to Track are oftentimes final decisions that it's hard to converse around those things. GitHub allowed a little bit of play there. It allowed a lot more freedom of discussion happening around concepts and ideas and mockups that were viewable right in the screen. Using Git as the version control system, it was more widely adopted. And number 4, letting our strategy emerge. We saw this take shape in the basic principles of Gutenberg. And to go through them fairly quickly, these were the guiding principles for a lot of the design decisions made, and going forward still are. Everything on WordPress website becomes a block. That is not an insignificant principle if we think about it. If we're targeting the need to combine interfaces or unify interfaces, if everything becomes a block, how simple that is for users once they understand that paradigm to continue through that. They don't need to relearn things. They understand that a block is a block, and the block is an interface. So all blocks are created equal. Drag and drop is secondary. Placeholders are key. This one's so important right now. We're talking about this continually in GitHub right now, about how to properly use the placeholders of these blocks when they're dropped in, and how they might be visually, and what should be displayed in these placeholders. And as we grow and we explore into block templates, we'll call them for now, you can envision a user really just selecting a template, a page template of blocks, and getting a variety of blocks on a page that all have placeholder content and are ready to be edited. Direct manipulation is intuitive, and code editing shouldn't be necessary for customization. That's a huge benefit that Gutenberg provides. So phase 1, we saw merged in with WordPress 5.0, creating a block-based editor. And now we're aware of a few other phases coming up. Currently, we're in phase 2. Phase 2 is about pushing Gutenberg beyond the editor. So we're exploring the widget screen, we're exploring the customizer, we're trying to see how we can use Gutenberg in other parts of the software. And if anybody was watching the keynote that Matt did at WordCamp Europe, you'll notice he touched on some really cool innovations with Gutenberg that are being done by community members. And how exciting that is, that if we can start incorporating more creativity into the UI or the blocks that come with Core. I think that's something we're focusing on in phase 2. And we really hope to improve upon this disruption called Gutenberg. So phase 3, we'll see a collaboration and multi-user editing. If you can envision like a couple people editing a Google Doc or something and leaving comments. Phase 4 is an official multilingual site support. So that is I think that one received like applause during the keynote at WordCamp Europe. It's a huge one. So despite all the bad mojo, right? I've shared some of the bad mojo, and there's been a lot of bad mojo. These are the reviews for Gutenberg. It's not pretty. A lot of people are struggling with the change. And it's our responsibility to really help people along, to give the people the support they need, to help guide them in the direction that they need to go to use that software and come out on top, be successful. So why do we love WordPress despite all that bad mojo? Why do we love it? Well, earlier this year, there was a site building study conducted, and the research, the results are all published on the make sites on .org, WordPress.org. But the answer to this question was extensibility. That was the number one thing people liked about WordPress. So being able to take the software and extend it in ways that benefit you, that help your business, that help you as a user, this is what people love. And we see this, right? We see this in a variety of ways take shape. We have the CLI, we have the API, plugins, themes, shortcodes, custom post types, widgets, custom fields, I'd add. There's just a variety of way in which people are extending WordPress nowadays. A lot of these things lead into like headless WordPress, which I believe is a track at this conference. So now, today, I'd say we have another way. We have blocks. This has opened up another way to add extensibility to WordPress. And blocks, as we incorporate them and we refine them and tie them closer to WordPress, we're going to see widgets diminish away, shortcodes diminish away, and everything becomes a block. And it's an exciting opportunity right now for people to really innovate with this interface, the block interface. There's great ideas out there, but it's still relatively light. There's not a whole lot it's not saturated yet. So it's a great opportunity. We'll see block templates coming soon. And I'm calling them block templates. Whatever name we come up with is probably going to be better than this. I know templates could get confusing, so we're going to have to figure that out. But I described this earlier as like a template of blocks or a page layout of blocks, block patterns on a page, and being able to select that in Gutenberg and add it to your document is great, and it'll help enforce good design practices as well. And as these merge into WordPress, I could see them working really closely with something like custom post types. You can have a custom post type that dictates what sort of block template needs to be used. So soon we'll see something, I could see something like global styles becoming a thing. And as these are merged in, that's going to transform the way themes are done. Themes are going to be about global styles, about ways in which they can inform the styling of the site and be able to utilize the structure of Gutenberg blocks in various ways. Themes can even help inform block templates and things like this. So those combined together is going to give us a different view of how WordPress operates. But I think it's going to benefit us in the long run. And so we see extensibility being refreshed and opening up as a new opportunity for people to get involved, which is fantastic. In addition to this, we see things like modern JavaScript libraries like React being utilized now, Git and GitHub. These things are essential for people and really open up like more opportunity to contribute. So with Gutenberg, we're essentially like, if we think back to those 2 points I made earlier about bringing in a whole new set of users or consumers, we've redefined editing and layout using blocks, and this is attracting more site builders, people who want to not only add content to their WordPress site, but they want to structure and lay out their pages. This can be done now. We've introduced modern code into the stack now, and this could attract and is attracting new developers to WordPress. People who are very interested in JavaScript and want to learn more. People just getting involved. I remember a question being asked, I believe by Matt at one of his talks, and he asked, who has learned to code using WordPress? And the audience, many in the audience lifted their hands. Now, those people who also want to learn JavaScript and React and modern libraries like this can dive into WordPress and learn. I've learned a few things, and it's fantastic. There's so much support, whether you're on GitHub inside of an issue or creating a PR, or if you're in the Slack channels at the core editor meetings or core meetings. Like, these are great opportunities to talk about things and to learn from others. We've got such a huge community of people with varying skills that we can all learn from each other. So we've essentially also provided an easier and more adoptable version control and repo system right now. It's not completely accepted across all of WordPress work, but in Gutenberg, we're using Git and GitHub, and this is attracting more contributors. People who feel comfortable with GitHub, who have used Git before. And there's a lot of people just coming on, asking where they can make a difference, where they can contribute. And so they're familiar with GitHub, and they jump right in, and they're doing fantastic, helping to contribute to a software that over a third of the internet uses. So this Gutenberg isn't a breakthrough innovation that's making WordPress better, right? Blocks have been around since forever. We've always built things with blocks and had some sort of block paradigm when building tangible objects in the real world. There are software and page builder, site builder companies that have incorporated the idea of blocks before Gutenberg did. But I will say that it is disruptive innovation. And I say that with a smile because it's making WordPress more affordable and accessible. And you might say, well, how is it more affordable? WordPress is free. How's that? But people I see are more, have an affordance with their time. They want to give their time to this right now. And they want to jump in and contribute. So it's more affordable for them to learn. They want to learn JavaScript. We have people contributing who are new at JavaScript and working through these things and learning as they go. And it's becoming more accessible in the various ways that I pointed out earlier about how it's attracting new site builders. It's attracting new contributors, developers, and in the whole other spectrum of accessibility, it is becoming very accessible. We are working through accessibility issues daily, and we're completing things. We're having great discussions with the accessibility team in WordPress and collaborating with them on solutions that are just improving the software, not only for people who have accessibility needs, but really for every user out there. One of my colleagues at work had mentioned one time, which I just thought was beautiful, but he said that it was interesting. We were having a conversation about accessibility, and he says, and the conversation quickly left accessibility and began talking about just basically how to improve the experience for everybody. And he noted that our conversation may have started out in accessibility, but it quickly led to improving the software for everybody. That's something to keep in mind. So disruptive innovation, Gutenberg. And I hope we can all get behind this because we need to disrupt ourselves. We're at a comfortable spot right now, and disrupting ourselves is going to push us into the future, and it's going to keep us relevant and keep our community strong. There has to be a differing of opinions for us to kind of sharpen each other, for us to grow and learn together. And I think Gutenberg is providing this right now. And that's my talk. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And if you have any questions, please ping me. You can ping me on Twitter or get a hold of me in Slack. I'm happy to talk more about the talk or more about Gutenberg, or if there are ways in which that you'd like to get involved more, reach out. I'm happy to help you find an issue or a ticket that you can jump on and contribute to WordPress, because that little change that you make is going to be seen by millions of users across the entire globe. You can't say that for every bit of software out there. There's very few technologies out there that do this. And if you contribute something, that's amazing. You've just affected millions and millions of people in their life. And if we can communicate and grow together, we can make sure those changes are for the better, and that each change we make improves someone's life somewhere and gives someone the freedom to share and to publish what's in their heart to the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. This was definitely, for me, a very inspirational, interesting talk that made me reflect a lot on how we respond to change and how we respond to progress and innovation and how we approach it. I said, I have a question, which is, what other things unrelated to what you've talked about today can we ask you questions about, whether it's other parts of your work that you're interested in, or whether it's things that you do for fun that we can ask you questions about. People ask Julie and Melissa's questions about beer. People ask Michelle Schlup questions about fitness. Floor is
Yeah. So, anybody's welcome to ask me anything about whatever. I have a family, 3 kids. I'm teaching them how to surf and skateboard right now. That's kind of takes up a lot of my time. We just got back from traveling 4 states in the US. We do a lot of hiking. Let's see, if you want to ask me about open source or other open source communities, I really like to talk about that. I partake with the processing community out there and contribute with them and try to get them engaged with WordPress and other people in WordPress engaged with other open source communities. I think that's really a strong point for us right there. And if we can keep communication and connect these communities more, I think that's going to help influence the open web. And that's something I think most of us care about, is the open web. So
absolutely. We got one question, which is, do you think WordPress will ever move totally to GitHub?
I'm hoping. I know there's discussions. I know there's a lot of conversation around this. So there's a lot of work to be done if that happens. And if you have a desire for that to happen, you want to contribute to the work, and there's a lot of pre-existing work that needs to be done prior to that move. So reach out to me. I will help you, connect you to people who are interested in this, and we can try it. We're a community, right? Let's work together to make things happen. I'm hoping for it, though.
That is such a question. In my background, have plugin development, right? I worked in the Caldera Forms team with Josh Pollock. And I remember, development was never my job, but I remember getting sort of critical emergency documentation and seeing documentation for SVN deploy of the plugin. I was like, what? And that was just because I'm newer to the space, right? So I had never worked with that, and it was really quite funny. I have another question here, which says, when can we expect Gutenberg Phase 2 to arrive to WordPress?
So that's a great question. There's continual work going on in the plugin. So if you get the plugin, reinstall it or reactivate it if it was deactivated with the WordPress 5.0 update, you'll see a lot of all the recent stuff that we're working on that's been merged into the plugin, and that's a great way to see the work that's being continually happening. We release a new version of the plugin every 2 weeks. So you're getting new stuff every 2 weeks, and that it's a great way to test. We've got some experiments in there as well that you can test and work with, like the widget stuff on the widget screens. A lot of the core blocks have already moved over to widgets, or core widgets have moved over to blocks. And so it's a continual cycle. Like there's not one moment when everything's going to merge into WordPress. It's getting incorporated with new WordPress versions as well. The plugin then gets merged into WordPress. So 5.3, a lot of what's in the plugin will be merged into WordPress 5.3.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have one last question here. It says, Mark, how do I find you on Twitter? And I can focus back in on your end slides, which has your Twitter, WordPress.org, and personal website. But if you want to tell us more about where we can find you, when we're going to have all kinds of fun chats with you, let us know.
Yeah, those 2 places are great. Or if you're in the Slack channels, I'm there on Slack every day, all the time. So ping me, DM me, ask me questions. Yeah, I'm available. And I am in your feeds most likely. So just keep an eye out for me.